Months away, the picture is very different. Sky's Greg Milam travelled to Middleburg in Virginia to see what people there make of Mr. Trump.
This is part of America where they like their traditions and where those who voted for the untraditional president are now having to answer for their choice.
Like I say, nothing's been proved yet.
Reggie Dawson's one of them, and he's not buying the latest on Trump's ties with Russia.
They want to investigate Trump for collusion. They've been doing it now for almost a year. They have nothing on it. They're calling what Donald Trump Jr. did treason. It's far from treason. He's a private citizen.
People don't like talking openly about politics here, and those you can persuade haven't changed their minds on Trump yet.
I don't think there's anything bad out there. I think fake news, over news, too much news can sometimes lead to too much, talk. But any other world leader, there's skeletons in the closet too. So hopefully the connection will actually help the countries and help the world get to be a little bit better of a place.
Do you think the president is doing enough on the stories about Russia, though, to reassure people?
No, I don't. It just seems like he doesn't take it seriously, or anything seriously.
This is Oxford.
On the Russia story, people here seem to be struggling with who and what to believe.
It's very hard to read what's going on. It's just, you have to go with whatever your gut instinct is, I think. And usually, I think gut instincts usually pay off.
And you think that's what people are doing at the moment?
I think they are. I think you still have he still has a very strong fan base, if you will, in many pockets in the country.
At least they can laugh about it, and this Democrat has even started interviewing her Trump-voting friends on why they're sticking with him.
I only have so far heard what the media is doing wrong. I still don't have an answer about what Mr. Trump has done that they would support. It's what they're hearing that they don't like.
It's a familiar story in today's America. Whatever anyone else thinks, the Trump faithful are as devoted as ever. Greg Milam, Sky News, Virginia.
Now, the Brexit Secretary has called on the political parties to work together as the government published its EU withdrawal bill. There seems little chance of that, though. The Lib Dems promised war. The Scottish and Welsh First Ministers called the bill a power grab. And Jeremy Corbyn compared it to the machinations of one of England's most infamous kings. Well, in a moment, the Labour leaders' interview with our political editor. But first, our political correspondent, Darren McCaffrey, has this report.
At 62 pages and 25,000 words long, it's one of the most significant pieces of legislation ever put to Parliament. This is the bill that will take us out of the European Union. And today, it was given the nod through its first stage.
Presentation of Bill. Mr. Secretary Davis, Mr. Minister Baker.
European Union Withdrawal Bill.
The long-awaited plans include officially repealing the European Communities Act of 1972, essentially transferring all Brussels legislation into British law. It also gives government controversial powers to tweak laws without parliamentary approval for up to 2 years after Brexit, and confirmed that the EU's Charter of Fundamental Rights won't be moved into UK law. All in all, the European Union Withdrawal Bill, as it's formally known, is essentially a big cutting and pasting exercise. But it is going to put the government on collision course, not just with the opposition, but indeed some of its own MPs. And that's because a weakened Theresa May, with that wafer-thin, somewhat borrowed majority, is going to face a vote-by-vote battle in that place to try and impose her version of Brexit.
This is the most significant piece of legislation we have seen in Parliament for decades. And at every stage, the government, I'm sorry to say, has had to be pushed, cajoled and prodded into taking Parliament's role seriously in this process. And because of the election, the parliamentary arithmetic has now changed, and it's time the government started listening.
But so far, there's little sign that they are.
The Labour Party will have their fun and games. They're split on the issue of the EU, and they, of course, were commenting on the Brexit bill before they'd seen it. But the raw truth is the British public spoke in the referendum, and one of the big things we said we would do is take back democratic control of our laws. That's what this bill will do, and I suspect there'll be a lot of Labour MPs that will be supporting the government in pushing this through the House of Commons.
Meanwhile, today, Theresa May marked her one-year anniversary as PM by getting on with the formalities of entertaining the Spanish king and expressing strained emotion in her first interview on her reaction to that devastating election results.
Devastated enough to shed a tear?
Yes, a little tear.
Yes. At that moment, that private moment.
At that moment, yes.
The Prime Minister today admitted that she's been on quite a journey to get to Downing Street. And even aside from those Brussels negotiations with a minority government and 1,200 pieces of legislation to pass, that journey, in many ways, is only just beginning. Darren McCaffrey, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, has accused Theresa May of acting like Henry VIII in using repeal bill powers to bypass Parliament. He was in Brussels for talks with the EU's chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, and spoke to our political editor, Faisal Islam.
Morning all. Mr Corbyn goes to Brussels. This wasn't the government's plan for Repeal Bill Day. The Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, meeting Michel Barnier to explain what he says is his own distinct Brexit mandate.
We're representing 13 million people that voted Labour in the general election, and these are crucial negotiations for our country.
It's a football shirt. The Labour leader handing over a shirt from his local football team.
You're now playing for Arsenal.
Not known for winning in Europe, to Mr Barnier. He thinks he can do better.
There will be a trade arrangement we'll make with the European Union. That is our focus. But we're not in government. We're there to outline our position. We're absolutely not negotiating. We're setting out what our general views are. And it was a very useful, very frank meeting.
But that Great Repeal Bill is in Mr Corbyn's sight.
In opposing the Great Repeal Bill, aren't you just sabotaging Brexit?
No, what we're saying about the Great Repeal Bill is Parliament has a duty to scrutinise what government does. Parliament has a duty to scrutinise legislation. But when we're presented with a bill from a government that doesn't have a majority, that has written all the way through it the idea that by what's called statutory instruments, the government can bypass the parliamentary procedure, then that is wrong. Parliament must have a say in how the negotiations go on, and we're determined to ensure it does.
Well, I mean, what's your fear here? Do you seriously think that Theresa May's government will use this as his powers kind of dictatorially?
In a democratic society, elected MPs don't just have an opportunity, they have a duty to challenge what governments do. I would say the same if I was the Prime Minister. Parliament does have a duty and a responsibility. That is what a democracy is about.
So at this stage, you're keeping it flexible. You're not ruling being out of the customs union, in the customs union single market or not?
Let's be clear. 1, we accept the result of the referendum. 2, we continue trading with Europe. 3, we have a sensible economic relationship with Europe in which we are determined to achieve tariff-free access to the European market.
So Mr Corbyn still constructively vague or inconsistent, take your pick, but Labour's First Minister of Wales, Carwyn Jones, and Nicola Sturgeon, also meeting Mr Barnier, put out a joint statement vowing to refuse legislative consent to the repeal bill on devolution concerns. For Jeremy Corbyn, this wasn't about a parallel negotiation with Europe, though he genuinely thinks it may yet come to that. If the task proves beyond the current Prime Minister, it will be no less difficult for him too. Faisal Islam, Sky News in Brussels.
An American doctor who's offering to treat Charlie Gard may come to London to examine him. The potential request was made by the judge hearing the latest bid by Charlie's parents for him to be allowed to travel abroad. Well, earlier they'd walked out of court after suggesting the hearing wasn't independent. Sky's Adele Robinson reports.
Under unimaginable strain, but with determination, they arrived. The beginning of their last chance to persuade a judge that experimental treatment for their son is not futile.
We will continue to make the case for us to seek treatment for Charlie with doctors that are actually specialised in mitochondrial DNA depletion syndrome. And we hope that the judge and the courts will finally rule in favour of us seeking treatment elsewhere. We love him more than life itself. If he is still fighting, then we are still fighting.
In court, Charlie Gard's parents argued they had expert evidence of the following: that the medication would reach Charlie's brain, there is a 10% chance of meaningful improvement, that he does not have irreversible brain damage and his head is growing, all disputed by Great Ormond Street Hospital.
The emotional impact was visible throughout, with Connie Yates